60-minute drive for a 60-minute game. After all the miles we've traveled, we're almost there. After all the hours we've worked, one more can make us legends. After all.
Welcome to another episode of The Last Word. I am Jeff Barnes here with Brock Vieira, because I'm going to mess up everybody's last name. That's what I do. And of course, that is not Joe Cardozo. That is Greg Rector filling in this week. Greg, welcome to Sunday Mornings.
Hey, it's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, and shout out to Brock on the West Coast, the best coast, as Snoop says.
Absolutely, and a lot of great football was played on the West Coast, but we'll talk about that in a little bit.
Indeed. So we're going to jump right into the weekly scoreboard, do a recap of certain games, because there's just too many on a full slate of games, right? So last week was simple. It was only a handful of games. So just throw out some of the quick scores. Jacksonville State gets the win over UTEP, 27-14. Iowa starts off the season with a dub, 24-14 over Utah State. Michigan in the Harbaugh special, the first Harbaugh into the Invitational, as we could say, since he's out for 3 games, 30-3, as they made it known they're supporting their coach. Notre Dame all over Tennessee State, 56-3. SMU takes down La Tech, 38-14. Oklahoma once again thrashing Ark State, 73-0. Ohio State, people were upset about this win. Listen, you got a new quarterback. They get the W, 23-3. Not a rousing performance, but a win nevertheless. Tennessee, though, on the other hand, 49-13 over Rice. And, well, we had some upsets yesterday, but none was bigger than the one we're going to lead off with. Of course, we got to start off down in Texas, where TCU goes down to Colorado and Coach Prime's Buffaloes, 45-42, an epic performance by Shedeur Sanders. Of course, we can talk. We got a bunch of guys to talk about, and we're going to really deep dive into this game right here. Guys, let's start this off quick. Greg, let's get your thoughts on this one, man. This was a big win.
It was a huge win. I mean, you got 87 new players at Colorado. 87 new guys. Now, they just went out and beat the team that lost the national championship game last year. That's pretty impressive. And whether you like Deion Sanders or you don't, I don't particularly care. The guy has a coaching staff who have really done a job with these guys who are all brand new. I mean, that's the thing that just is insane is 87 new players, and you're going out and beating the team that was in the national championship game last year. That's just unbelievable.
What about you, Brock?
Yeah, I'm not really surprised at this result. I was surprised of how consistent Colorado was to start. Obviously, when you have a team that is bringing in so many players and so many pieces, it's going to take a second for them to gel, but obviously it literally took them a single second for that to happen. I was kind of high on Colorado entering this year. I think a lot of people underrated them because, well, their head coach is Deion Sanders. If his name was Doug Sanders, we'd probably be talking about a different story. I mean, if we look at Texas State and what JG Kinney had done down there, he did the exact same thing, and look at the result that happened for them. They beat Baylor. Same thing that happened today. Colorado beat TCU. I know there was a ESPN guy that said that Colorado might have one of the worst rosters in all college football. You don't have one of the worst rosters in college football when you have Travis Hunter on your football team, and it showed. The man is absolutely electric. I think we could see for the first time since, I believe, 1997, when Charles Woodson won it, we could have a player that actually plays defense win the Heisman Trophy. Of course, this is a early take, but I mean, when you look at what he does on both sides of the ball, how could you not have him favored to go be a Heisman finalist? Everything to kind of sum it up is I'm not surprised. I'm a little bit shocked, But I'm just happy that we can finally stop talking about the hypothetical and give flowers what it's due. Shout out to Colorado and Coach Prime. Well done to you and your team.
Yeah, he came into the room when he was hired and said, "We're coming," right? I think now he can say we're here because you came out and you hit the gorilla right on the mouth. And when he hit your back, you kept hitting him right in the mouth to the point where he laid down. And that was the biggest statement of that win. If they would have just jumped out into a big lead and won, they'd be like, wow, what an impressive performance. But the fact of the matter was they had a lead, they lost it, they got it back, they lost it, they got it back. And it went down to the point where they had to come up with a big play and they made it. This was an outstanding win because it had everything you wanted to see out of this team, every test of character that you needed to see out of this team. And it's a definitely a tribute to the fact that he's gone in there and put his stamp on that program. Those guys play with the fire that he brings. Listen, Deion's always been a talker. If you're not happy with him as a talker, I'm sorry. That was him as a player. That was him as a person. Guess what? That's him as a coach too. You're gonna have to deal with the lip. That's just how it is.
Yeah.
But the way he gets players to perform is what you have to applaud. They perform to the best of their ability every chance they get. Okay. Sometimes they ain't good enough. They've had losses. All right. When he was at Jackson State. Right now, he's 1-0 at Colorado with a program that they weren't expected to win this game. Everybody, 21 point was the spread, but nobody went in there saying, oh, they're going to go out there and beat TCU. They may make it look good for a quarter, maybe even a half. Last year, that game would have been over in the second quarter. Because that Colorado team was nowhere near as talented as what we saw yesterday. I remember in the spring, after watching this spring game, we were talking. I can't remember what show it was, but they'd asked, what do you think their record's going to be next year? And I said, I think they're going to be bowl eligible. I really do. I think they're going to be bowl eligible. Well, they're going to be more than the bowl eligible for what we saw yesterday. So I may have bit the under in my prediction, not the over, or at the top, at the ceiling of that prediction. I'm now looking like I'm in the under, because right now, if you go in to TCU and beat TCU, what are you going to do to Nebraska, who we just saw lose to Minnesota, where neither one of them could score any points?
Matt Rule is in for an 0-2 start.
Yeah.
And exactly. You never want to count, the chickens before they roost. I believe that's the term. But what can you say negatively about Colorado? I mean, football is all about messaging. And the whole message for TCU is that we weren't a flash in the pan. We weren't a one and done. We weren't the guys that left. We are so much more. And one of the things that they emphasized was their starting quarterback, because he was a starting quarterback last year against Colorado and obviously got hurt, and that's why Max Duggan came in. Something we didn't talk about is when he did play last year against Colorado, he didn't look good. Like it was if I'm not mistaken, it was a close game until like the third quarter, and by that point, Duggan was in. And another big thing is they changed offensive coordinators. Garrett Riley's at Clemson. They brought in Kendall Briles, who, as a coach, comes from a very strong family background that may lack morals, but it's not the same thing. Colorado has two studs at the coordinator positions. Their offensive coordinator was literally Kent State's head coach last season. The defensive coordinator won 2 national championships as an assistant, one with Jimbo Fisher at Florida State and one with Nick Saban at Alabama. These guys aren't, clueless people coming off the street. These are knowledgeable people, and the kids that they brought in, outside of all the guys that Deion Sanders brought in from Jackson State, you look at Power 5 transfers all across the board. I mean, now that we've seen them actually put it together, it honestly shouldn't be a surprise how well they played together. And like to Jeff's point, the hallmark of a great team is, can you handle adversity? Can you handle momentum change? Not only did they handle it, they overcame it multiple times throughout that game. And when the going got tough, they pulled it out. And when the offenses were going back and forth, it was Colorado's defense that stepped up in the last drive of the game. Again, when you talk about a checklist of what are the hallmarks of a really great team or the hallmarks of a foundation of a great program, you just saw it
Yeah.
all there in week 1. I mean, what is not to love?
Absolutely. I mean that the job that the Colorado offense, that offensive line was so solid. That was the biggest shock to me, was how solid their offensive line was.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
it was much improved from what we saw in the spring game. The spring game's
Oh
offensive
yeah.
line, you saw it was a little undersized. They had some changes, but I remember clearly when they were coming out for that spring game, and they interviewed him on the field. He says, "We're excited. The guys we just got to commit to this program today." He goes, "Up until today, we were sweating bullets, but we got all the commits today, the day of the spring game.
Yeah.
All these guys that commit to come here next year for the fall." So when all those guys were were leaving the program right after the spring game, I was going, "Oh no, he's going to be in trouble." No, he said it before they took the field. They were excited for what they had coming in, which means they were more than happy to push those guys out. And you can't undersell what he did. Amazing job. So we go from an upset to not an upset. Okay, most people have this team pick to win, and they more than covered. Of course, we're talking about the Penn State Nittany Lions versus West Virginia. Very interesting game, especially in the first half. Got a little away from West Virginia in the second half. 38-15, Penn State wins in Unhappy Valley, as I like to call it. Drew Aller, 21-29, 325 yards passing, 4 TDs. Brock, how'd you feel about this one?
I like the little teardrop added to Penn State's logo, because that's exactly how Penn State fans should be feeling. This is not an impressive performance by any means, and the amount of talent that Penn State has, this game should have been the differential should be a lot bigger than what it was. And keep in mind that they scored a garbage touchdown with like 6 seconds left. So realistically, the final score was like 31-15. West Virginia is not a good football team. It's clear they don't have a quarterback. They don't have an offensive line. They have no playmakers at receiver. They have average defense at best. They have coordinators that don't really know what they're doing. They got Neil Brown trying to manage the football team while also calling offensive plays, and it's not working for either of them. And it's pretty clear that this is Neil Brown's last year in Morgantown. It is what it is. Penn State was not great. Drew Aller started to get together a little bit, but there were some moments where you saw that youthfulness in him, where like, oh, this could be dangerous when you come against the big boys later on in conference play. Singleton and Allen, the running backs, they look good, but what I didn't understand is there were some points at times where they would go away from the run, or they would run like a formation built in 1924. It's like the T formation is the best way. The wing T is the best way I can call it, which is cool if you do it once to success. But when you're doing it like 2 times in goal line situations and you're getting 1 yard average, you might want to, consider spreading your offense out to create lanes. That's something that was, thought about in 1970. So I don't understand why we're not doing it in 2023. But again, that's a different point. I was not impressed with Penn State at all. I think the offense is too pedestrian. I think the defense can be exposed at times. And despite all the big names that they have on the roster, James Franklin is an above-average coach, and he will always be an above-average coach. He will never be an elite coach. I think that they reached kind of the peak of what he will do at Penn State last year in terms of winning 10 games, only 2 losses to the big teams, Ohio State and Michigan, and then winning the Rose Bowl, even though that wasn't a college football playoff game. I really don't see how you can take any positives away from this game for Penn State, despite the fact that you won by a pretty comfortable margin.
Greg.
I'm going to disagree with the youngster on the panel. It's week 1. Relax. Holy moly.
It's West Virginia.
It doesn't matter who it was. It's only week 1. Penn State did not perform like they're going to perform in week 4, week 7, et cetera, et cetera. Bottom line, they still got the job done, and Drew Aller was solid. He doesn't have to go out there and be the superstar, guys. That's not Penn State football. Penn State is going to wear you down with their lines, and that's that. That's the way they win. It's a different style of game. It's not going to be a 500-yard passing attempt for Drew Lock. It simply isn't. So relax, Brock. Penn State will be there.
I would like to add that if we look at the teams that we expect to be in the college football playoff, did Georgia have that kind of a slow start? Not really. Did Alabama have a slow start? I mean, question bits, But Alabama, no, they boat raced Middle Tennessee State. Like, I mean, you see certain aspects of the foundation in terms of coaching that you want to see the championship level team, and I just personally didn't see it. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, Jeff. What were you saying?
No. I think it was, you were talking about the comparisons and the wins. I also think that you look at the opponents, right? Those two programs played down, and Alabama rolled. Georgia didn't exactly wow. They came out and they performed as expected, right? Beck looked okay. He didn't come out there like last year when they played a lesser opponent and steamrolled. Or better yet, when they steamrolled Oregon early, that was a big statement, right? So I think you saw from Penn State what you needed to see. Yeah. Can they throw the football? They can do it. Can they run the football? They can do it. Can they play good enough defense? They can do it. West Virginia, on the other hand, I think West Virginia has been a program in flux for a while. So the fact they came out, it was a tight ball game at halftime, and the mistakes were flowing. I remember watching that last sequence going into the half and the steam coming out of James Franklin's ears. So there are obviously a lot of problems they got to fix. Week one was part of their process of fixing said problems, and you did it with a win. The hard part about college football is you really don't get a preseason, right? I coach high school. It's virtually the same thing. You may get a scrimmage, you get a kickoff classic, and then you're into the season. Your training camp is your training camp, and we don't get the training camp that the pros get, where you get 2 and 3 practices a day. We're not allowed to do that anymore. So college, you'll get them. You can get away with that a little bit more, but you're not seeing a lot of other teams until virtually week 0, week 1. They may scrimmage a couple of teams, but scrimmaging and being out there in front of a crowd playing a game, whether it's an exhibition game or a real game, is something totally different.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I agree with you, Julio. We'll jump back to that game a little bit later, probably in a statement. I'm pretty sure somebody has them. So we're going to keep the show rolling. But yeah, listen. I watched the Penn State win. I watched a lot of games yesterday, as you can tell. But yes, that was one of them. And I must say, listen, Penn State played the way I expected them to play. I didn't expect them to wow me. If this game would have been a true blowout from the beginning, I would have been really impressed. I didn't expect that. Anybody with a quarterback change this year, I'm not expecting a lot. I'm really not, because you got to see a lot of them growing in the system. By week 4, week 5, I want to see what these teams are. All right. So we've gone through Colorado TCU's matchup. We've gone through West Virginia, Penn State. Well, this is one of the matchups I said would be one to watch, and it was a pretty interesting matchup. And I said, what did I also say? It'd be the first test this year of that young man in South Carolina who seems to have bounced around and is trying to make that statement that I'm back in Heisman form. Well, it did not go so well for him, despite if you look at the stat line, it looks amazing. If you watch the game, it was not as great as it looked on the stat line. We're talking about UNC versus South Carolina. The Tar Heels go into South Carolina, in a neutral site game. Okay, let's stress that. The neutral site game. Okay, pull off the victory 31-17 over South Carolina. Drake May gets the stat line here, 24-32, 269, 2 TDs, 2 INTs. He was looking great. Everybody was saying he was him until those 2 INTs, right? So we got to definitely hold those over his head. But Spencer Rattler had over 300 yards passing, no touchdowns, no interceptions, which is good, but no touchdowns. And so that right there tells you a story, okay? But Greg, what's your thoughts on this game, my man?
Mac Brown got his defense to show up. They just sacked Rattler 8 times?
9, I believe it was.
9. Sorry, yeah, 9.
Yeah.
9. Sorry, I forgot the last one there. But yeah, his front seven really came to town, and their secondary was outstanding as well. So Drake May, of course, he got a little greedy, and those led to the couple of picks. But outside of that, UNC just dominated. South Carolina's line was just horrific in front of Rattler, and I'm no Spencer Rattler fan, but when you're under that much pressure, you're not going to win games. Bottom line, I mean, they were all over him, and UNC just pounded them.
Brock?
I'm actually not disappointed with Spencer Rattler's performance because it's honestly what I kind of expect from him. I think a lot of people are still kind of hung up on Rattler, thinking that he's going to be this game-changing quarterback that we expect him to be when he first enrolled at the University of Oklahoma. But that became pretty evident quickly that that's just not who he is at this level, and it's probably going to be a lot worse at the next level if he's able to get there. For me, he's an average to above average quarterback that is very serviceable in the college game as long as he has a good scheme and players around him. He had neither of that last night. I mean, what can you do when you get sacked that many times? Honestly, what can you do? He did the best he could, and it just wasn't good enough. That's all I got to say about it. I'm very surprised because, I mean, Gene Chizik, no disrespect to him, but he hasn't exactly wowed people since his return to be a defense coordinator. And quite frankly, I don't really think Mac Brown has had a solid defense coordinator since Will Muschamp. But that's a long story for another time. What else could Rattler have done? What else could South Carolina have done? It's just what they are. You don't have an offensive line. And it's not going to get easier considering that you play in the SEC East. It is what it is.
Yeah, South Carolina's had deficiencies for many years. We don't see elite receivers coming out of there. We don't see running backs that are elite coming out of there. The best back they've had in a long time was Rico Dowdle. You think about that. Well, they have a quarterback who his redshirt freshman year, were considering a Heisman candidate. He hasn't been that since Oklahoma. Last year, he started to turn on flashes of the guy that people believed in. Yesterday, while people are going to say he threw for 300 yards, you watched during the game. Yes, he was sacked 9 times. A lot of those times, he was holding the ball. Okay, there were quick calls. Mm-hmm. You get the ball out on a quick call, or you throw it away. Okay? We're still seeing Spencer Rattler trying too hard to make the big play instead of playing in the system. That's what gets Spencer Rattler in trouble the most. That's where the turnovers happen. That's where, and instead of 3 interceptions yesterday, you got 9 sacks. Okay? There's times where you got to play within the scheme and let the scheme take care of itself. There's times where you got to put on your Superman cape and make it happen. He still doesn't know the difference, and that's one of the reasons why they struggled in this game to keep up with North Carolina. Because if they could do that, maybe this game is 31-24, 31-27. But Spencer is still in the thing of, I can be Superman all the time, and sometimes you got to be Clark Kent. And that's part of the problem with Spencer Rattler. And that's part of the problem with South Carolina, because you really need him to elevate that roster, and he just cannot do it.
Yeah, I mean, my pro comp for Spencer Rattler is Carson Wentz, and majority is because of exactly what you just said. But if you look at the South Carolina program in general, they don't have tremendous rosters. They usually have one superstar and a bunch of average dudes. Who's the best wide receiver to come out of South Carolina in the past and since 2000? Alshon Jeffrey. The best running back that I've ever seen there was Marcus Lattimore. Not Marcus Lattimore, Marshawn Lattimore. Yeah, Marshawn Lattimore, right? Or Marcus Lattimore. Whatever his name was. He got hurt, and his career, unfortunately, didn't go nowhere. He was special. Everybody watching that is like a young running back, put on his tape from his freshman year. Special. But who's the best quarterback to come out of South Carolina?
It's been a long
It's been a
time.
long time. Exactly.
That's why you had a quality quarterback come out of there.
People don't give Steve Spurrier the credit that he deserves for what he did at South Carolina. Taking them to 2 SEC championship games is absolutely remarkable for the Gamecocks. And I mean, once again, they're in this weird spot because they can't compete with Tennessee, they can't compete with Georgia, but they should be a lot better than everybody else in the SEC East. They should be better than Vanderbilt. They should be better than Kentucky. They should be better than Florida. Sorry, Gators fans, but it's true. But at this point, I don't really know where they stand anymore. I had them ranked as my third best team in the SEC East, but I'm not even sure that's like there anymore for them. So this performance, it's honestly it's depressing from start to finish. If you're a South Carolina fan, you weren't really in it. You saw your deficiencies, and then Mac Brown, started choking Shane Beamer during the post game handshake. It was all bad.
Well, what's not all bad is that we've gotten through 3 of our 5 highlighted games this week. Plenty more to come. We're going to get some quick drink while we take care of the sponsors. Make sure you hit the like and subscribe if you're watching on YouTube. That's how us little guys get paid. The big guys get paid in commercials. We do have a couple of those. We'll be right back after these here on The Last Word.
In 2006, we founded Yeti Coolers with a simple mission: build the cooler we use every day if it existed. One that was built for the serious outdoor enthusiasts rather than for mass discount retailers. One that could take the abuse we knew we'd put it through, out in the field and on the water. One that simply wouldn't break. We decided early on that production innovation would come from necessity and first-hand experience, not from market research and data analysis. Today, Yeti products perform when it matters most. Whether that be an excursion into the remote Alaskan wilderness, chasing redfish on the Gulf Coast, or just getting together with friends in the backyard, we make gear that helps you stay out longer, travel farther, and live harder. # built for the wild.
Hey football fans, we have a great offer for you from one of our newest partners, FanDuel Sportsbook. Sign up now for a new FanDuel account by using our special link located in the description, and you will get a no-sweat bet up to $1,000. That means that you can bet up to $1,000 on your first wager risk-free. FanDuel will give you the amount you wagered back in free bets if you lose. So go ahead and bet on your favorite team this Sunday, and even if they lose, you are taken care of. To claim this special offer, just click the link in the description and create a new account. Then, make your first bet on whatever you like. That's it. Win some money at FanDuel today.
You are watching The Last Word with Team NBS Media. And now back to Joe, Jeff, and Brock.
No, that Joe did not have a skin light, and that is not Joe Cardozo. That is Greg Rector here hanging in with us for Joe today. So we've gotten to 3 of the 5. Let's get down to our last 2. And we're going to start with FSU versus Purdue. And no, I don't mean Florida State. They're still sick over watching what Travis Hunter did earlier today versus TCU. We're talking about Fresno State going in to Purdue and pulling out the win. Eric Brooks had 9 catches for 170 yards and 2 tugs. And Brock, you're out west. Why don't you start this one off with Fresno State?
Yeah, I'm really not surprised at this. I mean, I had Purdue winning this football game, but I thought it was going to be a close game and that Purdue would pull it out in the end. But this result doesn't surprise me at all for multiple reasons. One, it's real hard to coach a defense when you don't have Devon Witherspoon, Sidney Brown, and Jatavius Martin on your defense anymore, and that's what it is for head coach Ryan Walters. That's his last name, right? So obviously, new guy at Purdue, defensive head coach after going from an offensive head coach in Jeff Brom, and so you're gonna go through a bunch of changes for the Boilermakers. They've never had a notoriously good defense out in Purdue, so this is definitely gonna take some time for him to establish himself over there. And on the other side of the field, you have an offensive guru in Jeff Tedford, who has seen every type of defense created ever and has found ways to exploit them, consistently. Like, you look at his career at Fresno State, obviously this time in the past, you look at his career at Cal, like, that's exactly what he made his money off doing. So shouldn't come too big of a surprise. Also, Fresno State notoriously has done really well against Power 5 opponents throughout the history of the program, going back to the was it Pat Hill days. I remember they went and beat Wisconsin one year. A couple years ago at the Killing the Board, they beat UCLA at the Rose Bowl. They also should have beat Oregon that year up in Eugene. Like, Fresno State is a very underrated program that people don't talk about because they're in the Valley. And if you're not LA or if you're not Northern California, no one really pays attention to you. There's a lot of talent over there from the high schools. There's a lot of great JUCO opportunities over there, and Fresno State is kind of like Boise State in the fact that all the Power 5 teams come in and they pluck the best, and there's always like those players that fall through the gaps. And where do they fall? They either fall to Boise State or they fall to Fresno State, and that's exactly what happened. Not that big of a surprise to me. Fresno State has been an excellent program for a long time under multiple head coaches, and proof is in the pudding.
Greg?
Yeah, Brock summed it up pretty well there. Fresno State, I had them beating Purdue. I just wasn't a fan of the Boilermakers roster. They don't have the talent on the lines, and Fresno State just really outplayed them.
Yeah, and also for Purdue offensively, they had to replace 3 critical players: Aiden O'Connell, Charlie Jones, and Payne Durham. I mean, when you have to replace talent at those 3 positions as a defensive-minded head coach, it's not an easy thing to do, because for a lot of these offensive-minded head coaches, they're able to put their hands on the creation of this offense. As a defensive head coach, sure, you're going to have your own style, but you are trusting an offense coordinator. That might not be a coordinator that you've worked with before. That just might be a recommendation from someone else. So it's going to take some time for you to gel. Whereas at least for Fresno State, for Tedford, his hands are all over everything. And also, may I remind everyone of Tedford's quarterbacks. If you go down the list, there's a reason why they developed so far. I got some stats for you guys from last game. For Fresno State, Mikey Keene went 31 for 44 for 366 yards, 4 touchdowns, 1 interception. That's a pretty standard scoreline for a Tedford run offense. And again, it showed.
What you normally have when you have schools like these two meet is a clash in styles, right? The West Coast teams tend to be more flash, more finesse, right? Big Ten schools tend to be more grit, than old school blue collar. Well, yesterday was the exact opposite. There was 2 teams that were very similar. They tried to be a little more balanced on offense. If they could run the ball consistently, they did. Neither one of these teams consistently did that. They had some success here, and then they would have some pitfalls, and the passing game had to carry the load. As we saw for Fresno State, their passing game was on the map yesterday. Yeah, we talked about the receiver. But also the quarterback went over 300 plus yards passing, and not so uncommon in this day and age of the spread, but nevertheless, you're seeing it in a lot of schools that are understanding that we don't have to fight for ground game yardage. We can do it in the air and supplement our running game by utilizing that passing game, and it's kind of balancing the equation for them when they don't have a strong running game. And what you're seeing from Purdue is, well, we don't have a strong running game. We don't have a strong defense right now. Okay, because last year they struggled to stop most opponents, whether it was Big Ten or not. So, but I'm shocked that this game was close because I expected Fresno State to win by double digits. The fact that they had to pull this one out versus Purdue makes me feel a little bit better about Purdue. I didn't have a lot of hope for the Boilermakers this year. maybe because you still have a couple of Big Ten schools who are struggling, Nebraska, among others. So I thought, after watching Minnesota's rousing performance against Nebraska, I was like, okay, yeah, that's a whole nother story. So I thought that Purdue would really would struggle a little bit more than they did. They actually were just a few minutes away from pulling out a victory in this game. So kudos to Purdue. I think overall they're going to have a better season than I anticipated. Jury's still out on some of the other schools in their conference, but right now I feel a lot better about Purdue, even though they lost this game. Fresno State did what I expected them to do.
Yeah.
All right, so we got one more matchup here, and then we can get into awards and the statements that we felt were made before we start to look to next week. Before we wrap up the show. And remember, next week, we're going to have 2 shows back to back. So we'll be moving to the 10 o'clock hour here on the East Coast. That's 9 Central, 8 Mountain, and of course, 7 a.m. Pacific for our peoples over there in the Pacific time zone. So you get a nice, worn out Brock Vieira next week as we go to our regular time of 10 a.m. Then we'll be followed by moving the chains at 11 with the NFL pregame content coming up. So that's going to be a big 2 hours. You get to see my face twice next week. Greg, you might see twice next week as well. Depends on how it goes with the boss. So, you get used to seeing us on Sunday mornings, folks. We hope you enjoy, and we hope you join us more often. So, last matchup, another upset in my book. I know some people said, no, it's not an upset. It's an upset in my book. Anytime a mid-major beats a major, it's an upset, regardless if it's a low major, okay? And it doesn't get much lower than Boston College right now. Unfortunately for them, NIU came to play, and they took home the victory in overtime, 27-24. After Boston College was down 14-0 in this, Rocky Lombardi, no relation to Vince Lombardi, with the 1-yard run, quarterback sneak in OT for the win, the walk-off. And just like that, we're talking about another Boston College loss. Greg, you want to start this one off?
Boston College and the offensive line just have disappeared. That's just so obvious. They don't run the ball very well. They don't pass pro very well. They got lucky to get back into this one because they were down 21-7. Bottom line, Boston College just doesn't have the Flutie brothers to bail them out anymore.
Brock.
Yeah, I mean, what can you say? Because these 2 programs aren't, I'll be honest, these are programs that I have these spot memories of. For NIU, it was when Jordan Lynch was there, and they went undefeated one year, and they lost to Florida State in the Orange Bowl, I believe. And then the next year, they went like 11-0, and then lost the conference championship game, and then lost their bowl game. And that's kind of last I heard of NIU for a while, until obviously Rocky Lombardi transferred Michigan State to there. And then when I seen that, I was like, okay, that's interesting. But then you don't really talk about them that much. And then for Boston College, outside of the weird fact that they randomly put first rounders in the NFL, Zay Flowers, obviously, this past draft, Zion Johnson, the draft before, Matt Ryan being the quarterback that amplifies it. You don't really look at Boston College that much. And when you look at Boston College from last year to this year, I'm really not surprised at this loss. They lost Phil Jerkovich as their quarterback. They lost, obviously, Zay Flowers as their wide receiver. And outside of that, they don't really have tremendous amounts of talent. And from a program perspective, they don't really echo success. They have 3 top moments in my memory. Obviously, the Flutie Hail Mary, which is without a doubt, Flutie winning the Heisman, and that one random year they beat USC in week 2. And that's kind of about it. I remember they had this guy named Dominic Davis one year, that quarterback. I thought he was going to take over college football, but that obviously didn't happen. But it's just a story of will. These programs are pretty similar talent-wise. Who just had better will and who got the lucky breaks? Went to NIU. And once again, Boston College is a Power 5 team by name but not play. And just because they wear golden helmets doesn't mean that they're going to be great. In fact, any team that wears a golden helmet is most likely to let you down. Shout out Notre Dame. But that was just a nice little pot shot for Greg. I'm going to kick it over to you, Jeff.
I knew it was coming. So, yeah. Boston College, how the mighty have fallen, right? Boston College has not really been known to win a lot of national championships. What they're known for is being a tough program that gets a lot of hard-nosed wins. They've always been a blue-collar team, right? They've always been that team that finds a way to get a big win against a big opponent, whether it was Notre Dame, whether it was Miami. They play Notre Dame almost every year. Like when they jumped to the ACC, they took Notre Dame's matchup with them, right? So this is a team that faces a lot of big opponents. ACC, they play Florida State. They play Clemson. They play all these schools, right? They find ways to win. They've beaten Clemson at times. They've given Clemson the business at times and come out with a loss, but this is a tough program. Well, let's look at the 4 years under our league. This is year 4, okay? 6-5, 5-5 in conference, 6-6, 2-6 in conference, 3-9 last year, 2-6 in conference, 0-1 this year with a loss to a mid-major. I don't think this experiment is going well. So we saw it in the previous head coach who was behind the times. He said you wanted to get modern. Well, maybe you didn't get modern with the right guy. A new head coach coming in with a vision for your program, if you hire the right guy, it works out. So far, you have great results in Colorado, right? The guy came in with a vision for his program, wiped the slate clean, and came in and got a big win. You're already feeling great about that hire, okay? You can go to other situations, but right now you have a guy going to year 4, and he's losing to a mid-major to start the season. Notre Dame, new hire last year, right? Had a struggle to start the season. The guy turns it around. It turns it around, right? Turns it around, right? So you look at it now and go, okay, what are you giving us? Okay, yes, he put some guys in the pros, but what you're not putting is wins in the win column consistently for your boosters to feel great about coming out of their pockets to give money to your program, for fans to keep buying tickets to come see this program, for kids to come there and say, I want to play for Boston College because I don't want to go there if this is what we're doing. That transfer portal was looking real nice to guys that lost their game yesterday. So I think what you're looking at this program, and you're looking at the direction, we always start at the top. Well, we're not talking about the AD. The AD, nobody sees the AD unless they want to show him on TV. What you see is the head coach who's there running the program, who has say over his roster. College coaches have a lot of say over what they have on their roster, unlike NFL head coaches. Sometimes you're given what you're told in the NFL. These guys have a lot of say. So for you as a head coach to come out with that kind of stuff, okay, 15-21 so far, 9-7 in conference. There's a guy down here in South Florida that got fired for that. I can tell you that right now. So Charlie Strong got fired for that, and he had winning seasons. So you can't come in and do this and think that because you're Boston College, this is okay. Okay. Granted, they have high standards for academics. There are plenty of good players out there who have great GPAs. So, and you don't have to fight over them because they're around. Right? I remember when that program, they had some great coaches up there. Yeah. All right. I've gone to clinics and learned from them. They're very damn good coaches. All right. But Don Brown, for one. Don Brown was an excellent defensive coordinator for Boston College several years ago. All right. But what you're not seeing is that kind of level of coaching. Right? This is not great coaching. I'm sorry. I grant it's his first opportunity, but this is going to be something where you talk about programs and changes being made. Check this box. Unless something changes in the rest of this season, you can check this box off. There'll be a new head coach at Boston College next year because you come out and lose the NIU to start the season. Doesn't look good for you in the ACC.
No, especially with the schedule that they got this year, it's going to be tough to find conference wins when you look at it. I mean, there's a couple ones I got circled as it being close, but I don't see any of them that I have them as a clear favorite. It's going to be really tough with a much improved ACC this year.
All right. So, player awards. Everybody gets to highlight a player. Greg, who is your guy for this week?
Well, I'm actually taking two guys. I'm taking both Travis Hunter and Shadur Sanders. Bottom line, what Travis Hunter did, he played 129 snaps yesterday. Wow. I mean, he impacted 17 points specifically in that game. That's an impact. And what that young man did at quarterback for Colorado was simply amazing. Bottom line, I don't care who his dad is. I don't care one iota that his dad is Deion Sanders. What he did to throw up 510 yards was simply amazing. That's why those two guys are my award winners.
Brock?
Absolutely. I'm going to go with a team that played in the state of Colorado and absolutely smoked their opponent. I'm going to Washington State's Cam Ward. Cam Ward is a quarterback that I've been high on for a very long time. I think Greg shares my sentiments that we've discussed it over and over, but we didn't really see it last year for a multitude of reasons. Today was his coming out party. He went 37 for 49. 451 passing yards for 3 touchdowns in the air. He also had 13 carries for 40 yards and a rushing touchdown as well. Yes, this Colorado State defense isn't good, but considering the fact that he lost Deshaun Stribley, that he lost his offensive coordinator and Eric Morris, a guy that he was under not only at Washington State last year, but also at Incarnate Ward, during his time in the FCS. And then for him to come in and come out firing like this, I think that the sky's the limit for this guy. I think that we look at the whole pictures of the quarterbacks, everyone's talking about Caleb Williams and everyone's talking about Drake May. People are looking for that third guy. We saw Joe Milton's name pop up, and I think after his performances today, his name popped right back down. But I think Cam Ward really made a strong case of why he should be in first round consideration.
Okay. My award for this week goes to Jacarius Caston. All right. Southern Mississippi. All right. Big win for those guys over Alcorn State.
Alcorn State.
All right. SWAC opponent. All right. So they cut a little bit of a step down, but not that far off. Mid-major versus, FCS. But nevertheless, 5 catches, 104 yards, and a touchdown yesterday. Just carved up a secondary. That's a very good Alcorn State secondary. I know Coach Fred McNair, very prideful in his defense. But overall, excellent game by that young man. So I wanted to give him the shout out. Everybody's going to go to the big scores, the Oregons, but those guys played a larger gap of an opponent. You expect those kind of scores. But they came out and they dominated versus a very good SWAC opponent. So kudos to that young man in Southern Miss. So, we reached that time of the show where we have something going on. Sometimes there's coaches and players that make a statement. That's right. We've reached a statement where we get to tell you about who we feel made a big statement yesterday. So, Brock, you're known for statements. Who do you think made the biggest statement yesterday?
I think the biggest statement was made by not just one player, but an entire team, and not in a good way, and that was the Michigan Wolverines. They acted like Jim Harbaugh passed away this week. It was an absolute it was irritating to watch. I mean, not only did they do that stupid formation where they all line up single file like you're in kindergarten, then rush to the line and then make a play, just the way that they were glazing over it. Like, oh, they did it in honor of Jim Harbaugh. Oh, they did it for Jim Harbaugh. Oh, we did it for Jim. JJ McCarthy pulls up wearing a free Harbaugh jersey. I'm surprised that they didn't put the logo of the M and where it says Michigan, they just put Harbaugh on it. It was absolutely disgusting. And that statement just shows how out of touch they are with the reality that they're in. Jim Harbaugh violated a rule. Now, whether we like it or not like it, that's not the case. If we go into society, I think that there's a lot of people locked up for nonviolent drug offenses that should be released. But that's my opinion. The law states that they have committed a crime, and that's the law of the NCAA. I don't like the NCAA. I don't like the law, but it is what it is. And once again, the school self-imposed the penalty. So who are you want to free him? Like it didn't make any sense. I think that it shows that Michigan Wolverine, the program is just completely just off in space. The fact that they're doing 3 like different head coaches, like this week it was Minter, next week is going to be his son and Mike Hart, and then somebody for the. I don't know what's going on up in Ann Arbor, but it's not good, and that's my statement for today. Is when other teams at Colorado are making real statements of how they're here, they're ready to compete. Michigan's making statements that 1 doesn't make sense, 2 doesn't even matter, and 3 just shows a lack of ability to see the world outside of the city of see the world outside of the big house. So that's my statement for today.
Greg.
Well, I'm going to avoid talking about that school up north as much as possible. So my statement actually goes to the HBCU school playing at Notre Dame yesterday. I don't care about the result. I care about the quality of football. And Eddie George's young Tennessee State team, they played pretty well in that first quarter against Notre Dame. Obviously, they didn't have the size and all that jazz to keep up with Notre Dame. But to see an HBCU school come to South Bend was simply an amazing experience to watch. Of course, I watched every moment of it. But yeah, I mean, Tennessee State, congratulations on coming to the big capital of the game of football.
Yes, they got to play where touchdown Jesus is, right?
You got it.
All right. So for my statement, yes, I went with the low-hanging fruit. Listen, it's the talk of the sports world right now, and how can it not be, right? We talked about this Colorado program last year. I know I've been scouting for the draft. We talk about every year with Colorado guys. Somebody goes, "There's a Colorado guy?" Yes, there's a Colorado guy. All right, so we scout everybody. Even if there's a guy that we feel that's a late round pick that's in a bad program, we're going to talk about him during the draft show. But last year, he didn't have anybody. So there's a big one that was happened yesterday, and everybody's talking about it. And you should. This is a feel-good story, all right? And I'm going to call Colorado for this year, I'm going to call Colorado Jackson State North, okay? Because we know most of the core of that team came from Jackson State. Most of the core of that coaching staff came from Jackson State. This story started at Jackson State University. Yep. Okay, when Deion came in there and resurrected a program that was struggling, okay, and we said, can he do it at the next level? He has done, all right, he has done what we have said for many, many times that we have not seen from HBCU coaches. They don't get the opportunity to go to the big show, the Power Fives, right? We always see them go from HBCU to HBCU. As many people go, Deion may have skipped the line. We needed somebody to be Moses and let my people go, okay? So right now, he is Moses. He is leading us to the promised land of saying, yes, black coaches can win at the Power 5 level, and we can do it our way. We don't have to do it the Nick Saban way. We don't have to do it the Dabo Sweeney way. We can come in with our own plan, our own agenda, and win ball games. He came in, wiped the program clean, literally wiped it clean, and came in and said, we're doing this my way, and he came out and did it in week 1. Now, he may only win 6-7 games a season. He may win 9 games. We don't know. What you have to feel good about is that he came out and punched a national championship contender in the mouth and took the title. All right? He was rocky yesterday. That program was rocky yesterday. Nobody expected Shoutout Sanders to throw for 500 yards. They did that. Nobody expected 4 100-yard receivers. They did that. People knew how good Travis Hunter was because Florida State was crying when he left them for Jackson State. Now you see why they were crying when he left them for Jackson State. because that's the kind of player that they have. Okay, that's the kind of coach that they have that got those guys playing to that level that they played yesterday. Okay, Greg's a Notre Dame guy. He did. He would have loved to have seen Edwards doing that with a gold helmet on. Okay.
Oh yeah.
All right.
Oh,
So credit to Colorado. That was the statement of the weekend. As much as we want to go with the other directions, all those statements are great. There's plenty of statements that were made, but none was bigger than Colorado's statement yesterday to say, hey, no matter what you think you know, this is how it's going down. And this was the statement of the weekend. Kudos to those guys over in Boulder.
Well, I think it's a statement of the entire college season. Bottom line.
Oh yeah.
Bottom
Listen,
line.
It was a feel-good story for sure. Yes, Bama looked good, but you expect them to look good against that opponent. I think Ohio State did do fine. I think they have a lot to clean up. I think, listen, we have a quarterback change. You just want to see them score points. They got up to 23 yesterday. It wasn't a play-down opponent. It was a conference opponent. So that's always a battle. So I know people are going, well, they only scored 23 versus Indiana. Indiana's a conference opponent. You got a brand new quarterback. They jumped right into conference play. Kudos to Ohio State for that. They didn't go, you know what, let's pay somebody to come in here and be our practice dummy for this week. So, as I told one of my colleagues that I work with in a different media company, is a huge Bama guy. I tell him, I say, listen, you can't keep scheduling cupcakes week one. You got to play somebody. So, unfortunately, that's how it goes. But yeah, final thoughts before we go off the air. Next week we have to really rush off the air because we have somebody behind us. This week we can kind of massage our way out the door.
Yeah, I'll just jump in and kind of going off your point about Deion Sanders. He didn't skip the line. I want to make that very clear. One, what line is there to skip? Let's be honest. And minority coaches compared to their Caucasian counterparts have two different lines. And especially when you start at HBCU, who else is jumping? The only coach that I can think of that has jumped to a better opportunity at started at HBCU head coaching job is Reggie Barlow, who's now the head coach of the DC Defenders. And realistically, Barlow is not trying to, insult the XFL because I'm a big fan of the XFL. You and I both cover the XFL. Reggie Barlow is a much better coach than being an XFL level coach. It's all about opening doors and opportunities. I know a lot of people were shocked at how solid Shedeur Sanders was, considering he did come from Jackson State. HBCU programs aren't filled with scrubs. These are solid players and oftentimes go to the NFL. Majority of them should be higher picks, but because they come from HBCUs or just a non-FBS level program, they don't get the love that they deserve. But that's a conversation for another time. It's not about skipping the line. It's paving your own way. The only way that you could say Deion Sanders would have skipped the line is if he got the FSU job out for the jump, which he should have. But again, I'm not going to hump on that horse like I've done, for the past couple of years. Last point of it is that there was so that came out that listed all the minority coaches in the Big, I believe it was the Big 12 and also the SEC, and the number came out to 4. It was Kalani Sitake, Dave Aranda, Steve Sarkisian, and Zach Arnett from Mississippi State. Two things to keep in mind about those 4 coaches. Arnett only got the job because his boss died. Satake only got the job because BYU finally made the jump from an independent to a Power 5. And the other 2 were just hired straight out. Deion Sanders not only paving the way for African Americans to get better jobs in coaching, he's paving the way for everyone to get better jobs in coaching, regardless of where you start from. And not everyone has the same path. You don't have to start as a GA and make your way up at a top program. You can start from other places, and if you can coach, you will get your opportunity. It's all about paving the way. It's not jumping the line. It's paving your own path. That's all I got to say.
Final thoughts, Greg?
I really want to hand out another kudos to Washington State for coming out and doing what they did in Colorado. This program is one that is near and dear to me because where I live here in Canada, the Spokane channels are what we get. So I've seen Washington State for decades, and how that school is now, part of the Pac-2 along with just Oregon State. They absolutely hammered Colorado State yesterday. I mean, and that's really something that I'm happy to see happen. I really, really hope that people don't end up knocking down Washington State for the problems in the Pac-12. Because the Cougars are always a solid program, always. Whether they have a winning season or not, they are always solid. And they do what you're supposed to do as a school. Those kids develop into solid citizens. And that's the other thing that people forget is that only 2% of these guys ever make the pros, right? 2%. So what Washington State is doing is very, very, very solid for me.
Threw me off with the dramatic pause, Greg. I thought you were done for a second. So, thanks for watching, everybody. Our time is up. Make sure you enjoyed today's games. Of course, Northwestern and Rutgers are kicking off now. Oregon State, San Jose State. Shout out to Coach Alonzo Carter over there at San Jose State. Hope they get the big. If you know the story on Alonzo Carter, suggest you look it up. Very cool story. And of course, tonight the big one: Florida State LSU. Big matchup there. ACC.
Go Seminoles.
Yes.
Go FSU.
Yes. ACC versus SEC. Always great matchups. So we're back next week, 10 a.m. Eastern, 7 Pacific. And if you're in a time zone in between, you can work the numbers out because it's just too many to go through right now. Followed by Moving the Chains, NFL content kicking off right after us next week. So we're sliding back up to our normal time slot at 10 a.m. Eastern. All right. Brock Vieira, Greg Rector filling in for Joe Cardoza, Jeff Barnes. See you next week, everybody. Take care. Hope you enjoyed the show. God bless.